I didn't wake up planning to stop a parade. In New Orleans, music forgives almost everything. Brass, umbrellas, second lines, but not this. My name's Camille Hart. I count money for a living and lies for survival. Today, my son is getting married on Royal Street. Parasols, lace, the whole city watching. Before sunrise, a number on my screen didn't add up. A fake clean sponsor, a shell company, and my house as collateral, signed by me at 2:11 a.m. from somewhere I've never been. I told myself it was nerves. Then I saw the invoices loop back to the bride's nonprofit and the permits loop straight through my husband's mentorship. One more thing. There's a boy in this story, 16. People call him a mentee. The ledger calls him something else. If you're listening from Houston, Seattle, the Bronx, drop your city in the comments so I know who's walking beside me. Because in about an hour, I'm going to raise my hand, stop a parade, and put the truth on a screen big enough for 300 people to see. Brass can drown a lot. It can't drown receipts. Stay with me. I woke up at 5 to the low rattle of a delivery truck and the smell of rain that didn't quite arrive. The house was quiet, except for my cat's muffled snore at the foot of my bed. I moved to the kitchen, made chicory coffee, and set my laptop on the table. There's a particular kind of morning when your mind holds so tightly to a day that your hands lose the ability to do any of it. I told myself the restlessness was joy. I told myself a lot of generous things. My son was getting married. People would dance behind a brass band down Royal Street, waving handkerchiefs, and the city would make our happiness public, as it does with everything. But the spreadsheet on my screen wouldn't balance. And when a ledger won't balance, a heart doesn't serve cake. The file was a donor and vendor list for Harmony Steps, a small arts nonprofit my future daughter-in-law's company frequently produced events for. The nonprofit was sponsoring a segment of the parade for community youth performers. It looked tidy, names I recognized, dollar amounts that made sense, a handful of corporate sponsors that always show up when cameras do. And tucked in the middle line, level with the bank and a law firm, was an entity called Bayou City Development Initiative. It appeared once under sponsors, again under vendor for lighting and staging, and when I cross-checked addresses with a separate note I kept in an old habit of mine, it showed up a third time attached to the lien on my house. I didn't say no out loud. I had that taste in my mouth, the metallic one that visits the moment before you decide something is either a misunderstanding or a break. I pinched the bridge of my nose, took a breath, and opened the county records in a second tab. The lien was a HELOC, a health equity line, initiated 3 months ago. I scrolled the signatures because that's where the truth sits and pretends to be handwriting. My name was there. My C had the same cautious curl it always had. The IP log said I had signed from a townhouse in Metry at 2:11 a.m. I live on St. Philip Street in the Quarter, and at 2:11 a.m. on that date, I was in my powder blue robe, asleep with the cat on my calves. The coffee was suddenly too sweet. I stared at the screen for so long that a hummingbird outside the window fell into the frame of my life, hovered 1 second, and darted away. Behind me, floorboards creaked. "You're up immediately." Julian stood on the threshold with his tuxedo jacket over his shoulder. He is 24 and wears his trainedness like a well-loved shirt. I see so much of his father in his face that it hurts sometimes. On good days, it hurts the way stretching does. You should be sleeping, I said. "He will later." He peered at my screen and then at me. "Are you balancing the world again?" "I'm trying to get a banner balance for Harmony Steps. The sponsors and vendors are playing musical chairs." "Mom," he said, and his voice took on a caution I recognized from when he was small and asked if dinosaurs were scared when they knew the meteor was coming. I always thought, does Riley really see me, not the picture, not the parade, not the way people look at our last name when they want permits approved fast? He kept his eyes on the rim of my coffee mug. He said Riley's name the way a boy says a prayer he's still deciding to believe in. Riley Carver runs a boutique events company called Magnolia and Slate. Her Instagram looks like an advertisement for Southern Light, peonies, petal confetti, velvet bows on ghost chairs, hand-lettered place cards, and a calligraphy that makes you wonder if your entire life has been written in the wrong font. She is efficient and gracious and will greet the florist and the sanitation worker with the same precise softness. She grew up on the North Shore and can turn any space into an apology for every ugly thing the city has weathered. She's also very good friends with my husband. They meet about logistics, I said. She needs permits and schedules and loading zone windows. Your father knows the right forms. He calls it mentoring. Julian studied his knuckles like they were an unfamiliar map. He said Riley to name the way a boy says a prayer he's still deciding to believe in. I walk into rooms and their voices lower. She calls him G like you do, and it lands wrong on my ear. Yesterday she said she liked how he mindstorms, a word I think she made up. Cold feet are not a diagnosis, I said. They're a sign that the rest of your body knows this is a big step. He smiled with only half his mouth. Some steps feel like falling. I want not to fall. Then call what you feel by its name, and if it's a flag, don't tell yourself it's bunting. He nodded and looked at the sticky note on the counter with my husband's looping G. Early inspections, back by 10, G. He's already gone? I said he was gone before the sun. He likes to make rules happen for people while they're still brushing their teeth. He likes people to know he made rules happen, and he didn't mean it unkindly. That's my son. His first instinct is to understand the good and only then measure the harm. Grant came back through the door at 8:30, smelling like cedar and optimism. He kissed my cheek the way a man proves he is present. He tapped the folded tucks on the chair with a light, certain hand. That's my boy. Did you rehearse the handoff for the parasol? We don't fumble parasols in this family. We don't fumble, Julian repeated, smiling like a student who got the answer right. Grant pointed 2 finger guns at him the way he does when he's performing Delight as if he invented it. Riley just texted about his zoning hiccup on Delphine. She panics pretty, doesn't she? Don't worry, ladies. G will make the fire code sing. He turned to me. You wearing the blue dress? The one that makes you look like an heirloom plate I'm scared to drop? I'll wear the blue. He laughed and kissed the top of my head this time. My 2 favorite people, he said as if a phrase could be a shield. When he left the room, Julian watched the doorway a long second. He changes rooms to change stories, he said. He changes rooms because there are always more people to charm, and I try to make humor carry what fear should have. At 9:30, I stopped at the warehouse Riley had rented for staging, and the air was glitter and gaffer's tape, riggers hauled truss, a florist misted something God never intended to see inside, and a brass band leader argued kindly and with hand signals about set breaks.
Riley stood in the center of it with the headset and a clipboard and the bearing of someone born in the right place and trained in how to make other people feel like they were too. She saw me and gave me a hug that was as measured as a legal contract. Camille, thank God, she said. The sponsor banner is 2 hairs off and my eye won't forgive me. Will you look? We walked to the vinyl wall printed with logos and polite grids. There it was again. Bayou City Development Initiative, level with a bank and a law firm, sitting pretty like it got invited to dinner not because it was funny, but because it held the lease on the restaurant. You must love these folks, I said, pointing. She brightened. They're the future. Infrastructure, but sexy. I raised an eyebrow. Sexy infrastructure? I mean, you know, they underwrite community stages and green corridors and her phone buzzed. And permits. They make green lights happen. Your husband introduced me. He has a good eye for people who like green, I said. She smiled and answered the call. Hey, G. Yep, 12 works. I've got the invoice right here. No, let's run it through Magnolia's nonprofit arm. It reads cleaner. She glanced at me like people do when they want approval and already have decided they don't need it. He worries about paperwork, she mouthed, exaggerated, adorable. Adorable, I said, and tasted 10 again.
I laid out what I had, the triple appearance of Bayou City Development Initiative, the HELOC tied to a signature I didn't sign, The way Riley practiced the word mentorship like a hymn. The fact that my husband has a talent for stepping into rooms where the temperature is set by other people's gratitude. She slid her laptop over and pulled up the Secretary of State's registry with the ease of someone who has memorized the address like a phone number. Bayou City Development Initiative, she read. 2 years old. Agent address is a UPS store. Board members, a dentist, a contractor who filed bankruptcy twice, and a woman whose Facebook is 3 photos of a Chihuahua named Captain. She clicked again. Magnolia and Slate Foundation. Filed 5 months ago. Lovely. Babies at nonprofits always run before they walk. I pointed to my screen. Harmony Steps pays Bayou City for lighting, staging, and permit facilitation. Magnolia's foundation is the pass-through. Somebody added a rush fee whenever possible. It's tidy, too tidy. And my house? HELOC, she said, already pulling up the parish records like a magician who keeps the rabbit in a second hat. She enlarged the signature window and scrolled to the technical log. Hard e-sign. IP address in Metairie, 2:11 a.m. Notary Warren Blackwell. That name shows up where mess does. She typed in the notary registry. Warren, there he is. He notarized 4 separate Bayou City filings and an affidavit with the youth outreach program. Busy man. Busy stamp, I said, and thought about how many forms look official because of a rectangle of ink. She kept digging like the ground owed her something. Here, she said, motioning me closer, Harmony Steps payroll for a grant Riley administered last quarter, a stipend for youth outreach liaison, Micah LaRue. That name ring a bell? Yes, it did. Micah is the 16-year-old who started showing up on our porch with my husband on Sundays. Grant says he's precocious. Micah carries toolboxes like they're heavy on purpose. He is sullen in the way of boys who do not yet know if the world is going to offer them a hand or ask for their change. He's from the job program, I said. Grant says he's got a good eye for lines and makes himself useful. Useful to the payroll, she said, and opened a second tab. Grant's Venmo, public enough. Monthly transfers to a woman named LaRue with baby shoe emojis. She turned the screen and there was a photo from a school fundraiser where people wear t-shirts with fonts that say, "We love our kids more than our free time." My fork lay on my plate cooling fast. I don't need DNA, I said. We need a birth certificate and a silent house to cry in. But I didn't cry. I filed it. That's what I know how to do. Want me to call Inez? Aunt Mo asked, already opening a message proposal to a contact listed as Robichaux. Econ Crimes. I can get her to the parade under pretext of loving music. Call. Tell her to bring the calm voice she uses with city councilmen who pretend clipboards make them honest.
Camille, Aunt Mo said, and her voice got the soft corners it uses when the city takes, and we love her anyway. You could do this in private. You could invite them to a room with upholstered chairs and a box of tissues and the settlement offer and walk out with a new mortgage and 3 fewer lies. You could keep the band playing. I know. I looked down at the files. But he's not the only one here. She wants my son to take vows into a microphone and call it a day. She wants her company's nonprofit to launder invoices as the brass drowns out the math. I don't want revenge. I want the noise to stop for 1 minute so truth can have a microphone. She looked at me as if I had finally said the prayer she hoped I would. Then let's build you a microphone. At 3:30, Royal Street was a river of hats and cameras. The band tuned behind the first corner. Neighbors dragged chairs onto sidewalks to pretend they were not going to watch. Children with secondhand handkerchiefs practiced waving, like they had done it all their lives. A friend lent us a short-throw projector in the balcony of her studio, and Aunt Mo placed a rented LED screen on a flatbed that usually hosts the DJ. We wired a laptop to a cable we'd have to apologize for later. I built my slides like a trial lawyer who never raised her voice. 1. Bayou City Development Initiative's registry page. Agent address listed as Suite 173, which is a pretty way of saying P.O. Box. Board members pull from occupations that don't meet in real life. 2. Magnolia and Slate Foundation disbursements to Bayou City, invoices for lighting truss, community outreach, permit facilitation, each with rush fees and Riley's signature as authorized signatory. 3. HELOC e-sign log embossed with my name and someone else's timestamp. 4. Notary stamp collage, the same little rectangle performing obedience on every form. 5. Harmony Steps payroll with Michael LaRue listed youth outreach liaison, stipend amounts that solve inconvenient gaps in an unofficial family budget. 6. Venmo transfers with shoe emojis. 7. A picture of a boy at a fundraiser and the caption, mentorship or maintenance, which ledger do you believe? At 4 o'clock, the band stepped off. There is a moment in a New Orleans parade when the crowd draws in breath as one body and your chest can't decide whether to expand or refuse to rise. The drums got the first word, the trumpets picked up the second, the sousaphone handed the whole sentence to the street. People in linen started moving like they had learned how to walk again. Riley looked like a painting at a museum that got out to remind you what paint can do. Her bridesmaids glowed in citrus silk that made the entire block look like it found the right hour to exist. Grant's tie matched the shade of denial he prefers. Brave, glossy, and very easy to catch with a stain. He took Riley's free hand and adjusted her parasol as if that makes it paternal. He shook hands he didn't know anything to and accepted gratitude he hadn't earned yet. I thought of the lending document and how confidence can be notarized into fact. Aunt Mo texted from the curb, invisible the way women disappear when their work is too sharp to see. Inez is 2 storefronts back. Your 30 seconds are ready, baby.
I walked to the band leader, a compact woman whose arms command weather, and raised my hand. She gave me 2 beats and cut the sound like a soft door. New Orleans does not love silence. The street inhaled. Somewhere, a table knife clinked a water glass by accident, and the sound made somebody shush their own heart. I lifted the mic that had been set aside to announce cake flavors. Friends, I said, my voice steadier than I deserved. My name is Camille. I'm the mother of the groom. I'm sorry to stop the music. We don't do quiet here unless it matters, and I promise this matters. Grant smiled with his lips and not his eyes. Grant said through teeth so white you could land planes by them. Let's let the band play. This isn't the time. It's absolutely the time, I said. If I'm wrong, I will apologize to every saint on St. Louis Street. But if I'm not wrong, then we have to put the truth where everybody can see it. The balcony screen behind me lit up with the first slide. Phones woke up like birds startled from a line. Bayou City Development Initiative. Agent's address at a mailbox store, board made of strangers, a logo that looked generated by an algorithm that learned professionalism from a clip art CD. Someone in the crowd who knows incorporations whistled low. The second slide, invoices from Magnolia and Slate Foundation to Bayou City, descriptions vague enough to pass in a dim hallway. A grandmother in a hat shook her head and said a word my mother would have pinched me for at 12. Grant laughed, making magnanimity look like a weapon. Camille, you can make numbers say anything. This is a party, not a city council meeting. Numbers do not lie, I said. They obey. The third slide, HELOC e-sign log, my name, my counterfeit presence in Metrari, 2:11 a.m., and a stamp that had the gall to enact authority in 4 different contexts. Grant took a step toward me the way a man takes a step before he says the name he will use when he intends to lure you in size. Darling, he murmured for only me and the 3 people closest, you're humiliating our boy. I said he's about to take vows into a microphone. I will not hand him a set of lies instead of a ring. The 4th slide, notary stamp collage. The 5th, payroll disbursement to Michael LaRue. The 6th, Venmo transfers with notes that could make you believe in emojis as evidence. The 7th, a photo of a boy in a gym with a banner behind him that said, "We love our kids more than we love a Saturday," looking up at a raffle basket like he was still deciding whether the world is going to be a friend. Riley had been smiling the whole time with the brave face women put on when men in suits called delays hiccups and extra fees protecting the vision. Now her face rearranged itself into somebody doing math with a broken pencil. She lowered her parasol like it weighed much more than silk. "Grant," she said, without taking her eyes off the boy on the screen. "What is this?"
He found his charm and wore it like a Kevlar vest. "Rumors and misunderstandings put into PowerPoint," he said, and half the crowd laughed the way people laugh when they pray they won't be asked to do anything else. I looked past them to Inez Robichaux stepping forward with a plainclothes partner, her badge at her belt polite and undeniable. If you live here long enough, you can hear the difference between someone coming for a party and someone coming because a party promised them a felony. Inez always looks like she's considered 3 different scenarios and picked the one that does the least harm to the most honest people. "Miss Carver," she said calmly, her voice a square edge in a room full of fabric, "we need to have a conversation about Magnolia and Slate Foundation's filings, the routing of disbursements through Bayou City Development Initiative, and any role city employees may have had in permit facilitation. We can do it here, respectfully, or we can make it procedural. You pick." Riley's mouth opened and closed twice. She set the parasol in the crook of her elbow and smoothed her dress with both hands. "I will give you my laptop and the key to my storage unit and whatever else you ask for," she said like a person who has finally come to the one decision that lets the ground stop moving. "Today is not a day to pretend." Grant tried to slide sideways toward the alley where caterers disappear to smoke, but Aunt Mo, who is 5'3" when she is not angry and 6'4" when she is, materialized and put a hand out like she had a badge of her own. "Paper trail goes in 2 directions," she said to him. "We can follow it to your side of the street, too." He raised his hands, palms out, flipped them as if to say, "Look, empty," and I had to resist the urge to list the ways his hands had been full this whole time. Julian had been at the front the whole time, his eyes moving between the screen, Riley, me, and back again. He took the mic I'd abandoned a moment before and held it for 1 beat. "We're going to pause the parade," he said. "We're going to tell the truth to each other. If there's a wedding after that, it'll be because it survived the truth, not because the trumpets drowned it out." Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping, hesitant at first, then with relief. The band leader met my eye and nodded. We gave the street back its noise. The next 3 hours moved like smoke and paperwork. Inez and her partner asked questions like people who had practiced not sounding like questions. Riley's assistant arrived pale and shaking and handed over access keys and passwords as if this was a fire and the water hose required 2 hands. A donor with a cufflink habit tried to argue that this was an internal matter, and Inez's partner, who had been quiet as a door, said, "Sir, a nonprofit taking city money is a public matter whenever the public is being fooled." He didn't raise his voice either. Grant did what men like Grant do when the music doesn't save them. He alternated between states. He apologized loudly, he pointed softly, he laughed when he should have been silent, and he moved toward exits like they would eventually feel like doors. I learned in a sickly, tidy sequence the scope of what he had done with my name. He had used a scanned signature to open a HELOC large enough to fund a mistake and a second mistake and the carrying costs of a lie. He had registered a springing power of attorney with the notary who notarized anything that moved as long as it came with the right handshake. He had told himself a story he liked about mentorship and wrote the rest of us in the margins. Julian turned to Riley. They were only 3 feet apart and a block away at the same time. He asked, "Did you love me?" He didn't add a name to the question. He didn't accuse. He asked it the way he asked the weather to tell him if his designs will last. Riley's eyes filled, but she did not dissolve. She said, "I loved being seen with you. And I have to respect a woman who will hurt herself that cleanly to stop hurting other people. I loved your softness. I loved your mother. I loved how the city smiled when it saw us. That is not the same as loving you. I know that now." He nodded, like something heavy finally set down. "Thank you," he said. And step by step, he moved out of a life that had been waiting for him and into a quiet we would have to learn together. In the end, our parade turned into a procession. People dispersed in drifts. The second line's energy didn't disappear, it relocated. It wrapped itself around neighbors who brought chairs onto the sidewalk and whispered. It slid into group texts that would hum all night. It tucked itself into the kitchen where my son and I sat with a pot of red beans going cold, while the cat pretended not to notice we had forgotten his dinner. Riley left with Inez and her partner to answer questions in a room where the chairs are designed to make you want to stand up and confess. Grant got in his truck and drove away with his jaw set like a lock. He didn't look at me. He didn't look back.
Our house held silence the way a hand holds a breakable thing. Julian sat across from me and laughed once, a dry sound that had never been inside his mouth before. "I thought we were going to pass out handkerchiefs today, not affidavits," he said. "Sometimes you have to wave what you have," I said. "Sometimes what you have is the paper that makes a difference." He reached across the table and we did what we do when we don't know what else. Count breaths. In the days that followed, the city did what it always does when a private story refuses to stay in its room. Local blogs wrote headlines that used ellipsis for drama and proper nouns for clicks. The paper did a sober column on nonprofit governance and the risks of cozy relationships with permitting offices. People I like sent one-line text that said simply, "You did right." People I know waved from across a block and then acted like a car had just come between us. My small office sat too quiet for 3 days. The few clients who called said words like brave in a tone that meant expensive trouble. I printed everything we had and walked into a lawyer's office with a folder so thick the intern had to carry it. The lawyer, a woman who has chosen a haircut that makes men think they know what she's going to say and then surprises them with how precisely she says it, flipped through the tabs faster than I expected. "The HELOC is nonsense," she said. "We'll unwind it. The power of attorney is a fever dream of a man afraid of his own age. We'll burn it. You'll keep the house. He'll sell his truck." She paused. "I am sorry about your son. Weddings are theater. Divorce is paperwork. Neither one tells the whole story." We filed. Grant didn't fight on paper. He's always understood that paper will outlast him. In a week, the DA's office held a press conference that said nothing because it had to and enough because it wanted to. An investigation into Harmony Steps disbursements, into Magnolia and Slate Foundation's accounting practices, into Bayou City's strange appearance wherever a convenient stamp could make it. The camera found the P.O. box. The P.O. box did not answer questions. Riley called me from a number I didn't recognize. "May I talk without asking forgiveness?" she said. "Yes," I said. "I wanted what you had, not your man. Your gravity, the way people look at you when you speak. I thought I could buy that respect with pretty things that look like it. I cut corners and told myself they were shortcuts. I took money because it was there and texted a man because he would answer. I loved your son like a beautiful room, careful not to scuff him. That is not love. I am going to tell the truth to whoever asks me. If you need me to say it on record, I will. If you need me never to say your name again, I can do that too. Tell the truth," I said, "because there's not a lot else left to ask for. If the truth makes a room for you again, only sit in it if you can live there." She cried. I didn't. And we hung up like people who will run into each other one day at a farmer's market and pretend the okra is more interesting. A month in, I got a letter with careful loops. It was from a woman named LaRue. The signature said Noel. The pages were not long, and in their spaces were all the things a woman learns to write around. She said she had seen the news. She said Micah had seen the news. She said her son had been told a story about mentorship and money and tiny chance. She said the day after he saw a photo of himself on a balcony, he asked if he was inconvenient. She said she did not want money. She asked if he could meet the other people he belongs to. I sat with that letter for 2 days. I wrote draft responses that sounded like essays and like silence. On the 3rd day, I took my favorite pen and wrote 5 lines. I'm not angry at you. This is not your fault. He is a boy. Boys are not secrets, and they are not mistakes. We can meet at the cafe on St. Cloud, where the coffee is always too strong and the chairs wobble. He's 16. He came in with his shoulders set like he had trained them to carry commentary. He held the door for his mother, then for 3 people behind us. He sat without being invited because he is old enough now to know he does not need permission to sit in public. "Hi, Micah," I said. "Ma'am," he said. He didn't look up at me. He looked at my son. Julian had insisted on coming. He said, "Hi, I'm Julian. Do you like to build things?" "Skateboards, ramps when I can." He looked down. He was supposed to help me build a board. He liked to talk about grip tape, and every time we tried to pick a day, he would get a text and say, "Mentorship is unpredictable." "I'm sorry," Julian said.
"I'm not," Micah said, and finally looked up. "I don't want sorry. I want the right words. I know what he did. I know what he didn't. I just want to know if I'm going to keep being a rumor or if I can be a person with a first and last name in other people's mouths." "You are a person," I said, "with a name, not an invoice line. You don't have to argue your way into any room I am in." He looked at his mother, who nodded, and he nodded back. "Okay," he said, and the air around the table got incrementally less sharp. We met again and then again. He came over for gumbo that was too spicy for a boy who pretends it's not. He came over for Thanksgiving, where he took both roles I meant to save for later. He came over for the quiet Tuesday nights when Julian finally admitted he did not want to design rooftop patios for men who never look up from their phones. He came over so many times that my cat began to act like she had known him all his life. Grant called once. I didn't pick up. He called again, and again I didn't. He came to the house on a Thursday night in November with a bouquet of grocery store flowers that looked like they were trying to unlearn being plastic. "I'm not here to plead," he said at the door. "I'm here to confess, but the real kind." I let him in because I have known this man since he was 21 and could not afford new shoes, and it hurt my sense of justice to deny myself the knowledge of whether he had grown new words. He said, and he is the kind of man who always begins a confession sideways, "I thought as long as I was useful, rules were suggestions. People came to me scared. I made them not scared. And I liked how that felt. I told myself I could speed a permit here if I slowed a permit there, and the water would still balance. It didn't. It never does. It just runs downhill to the lowest place, and it turns out I was building that place under my own feet." He put the flowers on the table and sat and cried. He cried like men do when they remember their first grief and realize they have not cried properly since. I brought him a glass of water because that is what you do. I did not touch his shoulder. He said, "I had a son. I made him watch me not claim him, and then I told myself I had a reason. There is no reason. There is no reason for stealing from the woman who put soup on a table and paid a mortgage and made me a person in public by making me honest in private. I am sorry. It is worth less than your retirement account and more than everything I can think of. I said, because it was true, I forgive you. Not for you, for me. I need the weight gone so I can lift other things. He nodded, like he had come to hear the exact sentence and got the one he deserved. The divorce finalized in the spring. I got the house. He got a 1-bedroom with carpet that didn't match the baseboards. The HELOC was unwound like a bad story. The notary got a visit from a person who says things like license with a very specific tone. Riley's case settled before it got to trial. She pled to a lower count, paid restitution, and started volunteering at a youth theater whose director is one of those women who can smell a lie from 6 streets away and reward truth like candy. Julian left his firm and returned to school for landscape architecture because he likes putting shade where it should be and doesn't mind getting dirty for design. He worked at a community garden off St. Bernard with a retired electrician who insists tomatoes don't need advice. I watched my child's hands grow calluses that made him sleep harder and wake kinder. The city forgot us, the way it forgets everything eventually, generously and in favor of the next shiny story. I learned to love my block again at 12% volume. On Tuesdays, I had coffee with a woman whose husband is still learning not to throw everything at the wall at once, and we talked about saints and soap. On Fridays, I stood at the fence and traded recipes with a neighbor who knows how to make so many kinds of rice, I question whether the dictionary is wrong. 1 year to the day after I stopped the parade, the neighborhood threw another kind. No bride, no parasol, no chain of pearlized obligations. Julian had designed a mural for a school wall, a wash of cypress knees and brass bells, and a silhouette of a boy holding a handkerchief in the air like he just figured out why you wave things. The band played because this is New Orleans and the air hates not having a reason to move. Children danced because generators were there and the sound was there and their joy didn't ask for invitations. Grant stood on the far end of the block. I saw him like you see a cloud decide not to rain. He had the posture of a man who knows how to enter and now practices how not to. He saw me see him and lifted a hand. He didn't come over. I didn't wave. We were 2 people who shared a past and a boy who deserved a proper future. And that was enough that day.
I thought back to the morning of the wedding that wasn't. I imagined walking into that kitchen and asking the woman I used to be to sit for a minute. I would put a hand on her shoulder and tell her 2 sentences and no more. You are going to stop a parade and nobody will forgive you at first. Stop it anyway. I looked at the band and the mural and my son and the other son, and the old pain did the thing it finally learned how to do. It dissolved enough to let joy stand up. Thank you for listening to me tell this whole thing without cuts. If any of this touched something you needed touched, tell me where you're listening from. I read those. They remind me that a story can cross state lines without a warrant. If you want to hear more of the messy, honest kind, the kind that isn't a tidy slideshow, but a long improvised song, stay around. I'll be here most Tuesdays with coffee that's too strong and a cat who thinks she runs this house and a story that makes my voice shake and then stop. The night after the mural, I sat on my porch with a glass of water and my laptop open to a blank document and typed a name, Bayou City Development Initiative. The Secretary of State page told me it had been dissolved. The Chihuahua lady resigned. The notary did too. The board no longer existed. There is a small pleasure in seeing a rectangle of ink lose its power. I closed the laptop and listened to teenagers on the corner practice stepping to a song they didn't choose. I listened to a car backfire and a woman laugh and someone drag a chair across a floor. I thought about how in this city, when things break, the community collects the pieces and makes something we can dance behind. Around midnight, a neighbor upstairs started practicing trumpet softly, muted, polite, full of aching. The first few notes wobbled, then confidence came back like a plant that doesn't mind the heat. The tune wandered and found itself and made a shape that sounded like forgiveness learned the right key. I realized then that I had been carrying a bouquet of apologies for a year and finally set it down in the hallway where the cat could sniff it. Forgiveness is not an absolution you hand to someone else. It is a permission slip you sign for yourself to sleep without checking the locks twice. If you are sitting in your car right now outside of a house where the truth is going to make some people cry, listen to me. The band can wait. The city will still dance. You are allowed to stop the parade. You are allowed to ask for 30 seconds of quiet. You are allowed to point at a screen and say, "This is the shape of the math." You are allowed to build something smaller and truer after the brass goes by. The morning after I said that out loud to no one, the cat woke me too early and I made bad toast and opened my email to a message from a woman in Texas who said she had watched until her coffee went cold and she had decided to sell a ring that only reminded her of a ceremony, not a marriage. A man in Detroit wrote he didn't watch weddings on television anymore because they made his chest hurt. But he watched mine on a phone because it was a different kind of ceremony, and maybe he could do one of his own.
A boy named Ezra wrote from somewhere that included snow. He said he was 16 and he had a mentor who loved him like work, but not like a child, and he wasn't going to let that be the only way he got to be loved. I hit reply 3 times and then didn't send anything. I put a hand over the keyboard because sometimes the screen does not need my words. It needs my silence to make room for theirs. That afternoon, I walked to the corner store and bought spices I don't know how to use and lemons because they make everything honest. I passed the mural and the brick that still smelled like paint and watched a toddler point at the silhouette of the boy with a handkerchief and say a word that sounded like music. I stood there with my sack and understood that my life had become something I did not plan and wouldn't trade. The house is smaller in its dreams and bigger in its breath. The table we sit at is old enough to wobble when a teenager laughs too hard. On Sundays, when Micah comes by, he never knocks. He just pushes the door and says, "Yo," like he owns a share in the kitchen. Julian always says, "What took you so long?" And then they argue about grip tape and we all eat more than is kind. The last time Grant came, he stayed on the sidewalk and asked if he could leave a bag of tools for a boy he didn't father properly. I said yes from the porch and waved him off before he could start inventing a story about why. He walked away slowly, and I put the bag in the back of the closet until Michael was ready to decide if gifts are poison or just objects. He decided they were objects. He pulled out a palm sander and a level and said, "This'll make the work easier." And that is the only blessing we needed. 2 weeks ago, Inez stopped me at the farmer's market and bought me tomatoes like the ones that pretend to be hearts. She asked about the cat because public servants have to be human in their off hours, so we remember to trust them. I asked her how Harmony Steps had fared. She said, "The nonprofit is fine. The people who tried to set it on fire are singed. You can keep buying tickets to their shows." I thanked her for letting us keep doing our life out loud. She shrugged and said, "The law cannot be a mystery novel. I prefer it when the last chapter is boring. I like a woman who loves a happy ending that doesn't make the papers." On the anniversary of the parade, I wrote a sentence on a piece of paper and taped it to the inside of the pantry door where only I see it. "Stop it sooner next time."
Not because I am ashamed of waiting, not because I owe anyone a timeline, because the space between the first wrong feeling and the decision to name it is where mold grows. Houses here teach you that. At dusk, when the light in my kitchen does the thing it does where every glass looks like a saint's window, I stop and make room for the day to settle. I listen to music from somebody else's living room, never the same song twice. I tell my boy we are making red beans tomorrow and he needs to soak something. I text the kid who's not a kid to bring back my palm sander. I wipe a single spot off the counter because there's always a single spot. And sometimes, when the night feels like a room I can trust, I stand on my porch and look down the block. I do not look for a truck to turn the corner. I do not watch for a man to come explain himself. I wait for a brass line to cross the next intersection because there's always one coming eventually, and when it does, I can wave a handkerchief without pretending it's a surrender flag. If you've been here this long, if you heard the whole song, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what parade you need permission to stop. Tell me if I need to sit on the porch rail and watch with you. I have time. The band can wait. The truth is loud enough to carry, even in the quiet.